Welcome to Commentary Corner, where today I have the pleasure of the company of top football commentator Peter Drury, one of the best known football voices worldwide. Peter is joining me outside IMG, one of a range of broadcasters he works for. He's commentated on the last 6 World Cups, including 2 finals and all 6 European Championships dating back to 1996. So obviously he has a vast range of experience, starting in 1990 with 8 years at the BBC, followed by 14 years at ITV, so comfortably got his testimonial. And from 2012 he's been freelance, majoring with Premier League Productions and BT Sport. Peter reckons he's not far off 2,000 commentaries, so let's tap into his experience and expertise. And speaking of experience, Peter, when you lay it all out like that, it hasn't been a bad ride, has it?
So far, so good. Listen, I've been very, very lucky, and all of us who do this silly thing we call a job need to remind ourselves on a fairly regular basis how fortunate we are, because when you boil it down, it's only shouting footballers' names for a living, and there are people who do much, much more important work than we do.
And just going right back in that extensive archive, memories of your early days and also your first ever game.
Well, first ever game it's hard to recall. In my early sort of agency days in the late 80s, I reported a few games for various local radio stations, but I think when I joined the BBC in Leeds, local BBC in 1990, I must have done a first game at Huddersfield Town or Bradford City, and I would have sounded squeaky and frightened and ill-informed, and I dare not think about what the overall impression was. But I must have got away with it, and anybody who is just starting up and listening to this and worrying about what they sound like and worrying about what other people think, what you need more than anything else to begin with are tolerant, understanding people around you who'll let you make your mistakes, forgive you for them, and understand that you have the potential to go beyond that and progress your career. And fortunately, I was surrounded by people like that who were only ever supportive.
What would you say is the best game you've ever commentated on? It's a predictable question, but one I feel I've got to ask.
Actually, the most excited I think I've been by a football match in context was in the old 4th Division at Doncaster Rovers in about 1990, when Halifax Town came from 3-0 down and won a game 4-3 against Doncaster in the last 20 minutes. But that's probably not the answer you expected or particularly wanted. I think probably I've never been more thrilled to be at a football match than for my World Cup finals, to be honest. Not because they were necessarily the very best games, but because of what they symbolised in my life. And it was obviously a great point of fulfilment to be working on that stage. So many other games that I've seen and so many exciting climaxes. The Aguero goal, obviously Roma-Barcelona happened for me in a big way last year. And I've just been so lucky. It's kind of a blur of good fortune.
And what's the funniest thing you've seen at a game?
Funniest? Gosh, now I'm struggling. I suppose I can giggle at an own goal like anybody else can. Beyond that, I've broadcast in various interesting circumstances. I was recalling the other day a Champions League match, one of my very early ones for ITV. Between Galatasaray and Chelsea at the old Ali Sami Yen Stadium in Istanbul, where I began the game with supporters climbing on my back and climbing on the desk in front of us and all of that. And that was at a stage of my television career where I was very young and new and earnest and frightened. And I look back on that and think how, in retrospect, we laughed. And actually, what a good experience it was for me, because after that, I thought if I can get through that, I can possibly get through more or less anything. Yeah.
And you are known, obviously you're off social media, you have an unofficial social media account called @FootballPoet. You're known for a certain sort of poetic style of commentary almost. There's a lot of people that probably would want to know, say with that Roman ruins episode, shall we call it, just how many of those lines are pre-written, or how much of it is noted and then comes naturally with a particular moment, and what's the balance?
I have to say that anything that happens once the first whistle is blown is not pre-written or preconceived at all, because that would be balmy. Everybody knows, if they stop and think about it, that you cannot script a football match. And if you try to script a goal or a moment, you are heading for trouble for 2 reasons. 1, because it'll sound very scripted, and 2, because what you preconceive won't be precisely what happens. You can think through it till you're blue in the face, but you cannot have a line that actually encapsulates what actually happens. You can suggest what might happen and prepare something for it, and it won't be quite right. So that Roman ruins thing, I can honestly say, for better or worse, because you don't have to like it, that came somehow off the top of my head in the moment. And people have asked me about that, and I would convince them of the truth by asking them this question. If I had that line ready for a very specific goal scorer, a Greek, Manolas, in that moment, does that presuppose that actually I had a line ready for any one of 36 players who might have scored? And if I did, then my goodness me, I really didn't go to bed the night before. I didn't eat or drink or breathe. You'd be stupid to think that you can prepare in that manner. You can't, because it'll go wrong.
And that brings us on to prep. So you said in another interview that you always look to get at least 3 lines from a game that go well beyond what you might find in an Optipack and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to understand, maybe through an example would help, what exactly you mean in terms of digging and digging and digging some more, and on a wider level, sort of what's your keys to good commentary prep?
Yeah, in terms of factual prep, absolutely. You dig and dig and dig for as long as time permits, and time is finite, so you can only do so much. When I say that, what I mean is, if I see written down by someone else who's done some stats, Aston Villa are 5 games unbeaten. They haven't been 5 games unbeaten. Well, Aston Villa are 5 games unbeaten. What's the next stage to that? Who was the last team to beat them? When did they last go 5 games unbeaten? When they went 5 games unbeaten 6 years ago...
How did
it end? Yeah, what was the team that beat them? And then can you find a parallel with the fixture that exists now? And if there's some really good, history, I hear people say things like... here's a good one. I did Liverpool-Burnley the other day. So... Burnley haven't won at Anfield since 1973. Well, actually, that fact on its own is pretty useless, because they've not often played at Anfield since 1973. So people can say, well, it's 5 games since Burnley won at Anfield, or 10, or whatever it's been. But that's only interesting if you bring it to life by finding out the circumstances in which they last won at Anfield. Who scored the goal? Do we remember him? There's a famous old name. Someone who, if you're a Burnley fan of a certain age, you'd hear that name and you think, oh, wow, I remember him. Can you find a match report and discover, as I was lucky to do, that actually it was a fullback who hit a 30-yarder past the great Ray Clements, and won the game for Burnley? That's what I mean by going an extra mile. And I'm not trying to give myself a halo and say I can always achieve this, but what I'm saying is that on a really good day you can bring what is a bland black and white fact to life, bring it to colour by contextualising it and kind of giving it a better reason for being there.
Taking away the blatant differences between radio and TV style of commentary, which most people can broadly appreciate, what would be your more specific advice to young broadcasters who are trying to build a name for themselves?
I would say, first and foremost, absolutely be yourself. There's no point trying to pretend to be someone else, trying to do it the same way anyone else does it. Be yourself, have the confidence to do that, whilst having the humility, of course, to try and learn from other people. All of us should never stop trying to learn from other people, but have the confidence to do it the way you want to do it. Understand that it is a job, it's not a pastime, as fortunate as we are to do the job, and therefore it does require hard work. Understand also that much as it is a great job, like any other job, there are good days and bad days. It won't always be perfect. You're going to need to be thick-skinned, but always have in your eye line that sense of incredible privilege, because it's a joy to articulate sport. If you love the game, if you don't love the game, by the way, you'll be found out very quickly, but assuming you love the game and you love the language and you have a chance to dovetail the pair of those and articulate something that you'd probably be choosing to watch even if you weren't being paid to watch it, it doesn't get a lot better than that. So above all, just enjoy. Don't worry about it. Enjoy it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, Peter.
Thank you. Cheers, Michael.